Hello and welcome to the video. My name is Wade Daniel Smith, and this video is entitled Mixed Martial Arts, How BJJ and especially the Gracie family deceived the entire world. Because now everybody thinks Gracie Jiu Jitsu is the best martial art, and it's not. The only reason Gracie Jiu Jitsu works in mixed martial arts is because of the rule system that bans most good karate moves. And actually, most good karate moves need to be banned in sports to keep you from accidentally killing one another. But they teach Gracie Jiu Jitsu for self defense, and Gracie Jiu Jitsu is not good for self defense. In a self defense situation, you don't want to be on the ground grappling with somebody because you don't know if a second or third attacker is going to club you in the back of the head with a pipe. Whereas if you're a karate expert, at least you're mobile when you're standing up and you have a chance of defending against a second or third attacker. If you're wrestling with somebody on the ground, they could pull a knife or a gun. You could pull a knife or a gun standing up, but at least standing up, you have a chance to defend yourself. If you're wrestling with them and they pull a knife, you're dead because they're going to stab you 10 times before you even realize you're hit. All right. But anyway, for sport fighting, even, let me read to you the Unified World Rules fouls, the total number of fouls in MMA, and most of them are banned karate moves. All right. Just to be honest with you. Butting with the head, all right, that's not even a good idea, so that doesn't matter. Eye gouging of any kind, the first thing we learned and was a white belt in karate is eye gouges. Biting or spitting at an opponent, obviously. Fish hooking, which is like any kind of pressure point, such as pulling the lips or the mouth or sticking your hands in your opponent's mouth, nose, or ears, or uh, uh, hair pulling. Oh my God, don't pull my hair, bro. You can get a haircut. Spiking the opponent to the canvas, such as a DDT or a pile driver. Strikes to the spine or the back of the head. Throat strikes of any kind and or grabbing the trachea. They don't specifically ban this move right here where you grab this muscle group on the side of the neck. I checked and it's not banned, and most people will tap to it if their muscle protrudes enough. It only takes your thumb. It's not specifically banned. You just take your thumb and jam it between the muscle and the neck bone and pull out, and most people will tap to that. As far as I can tell, it's not banned. Fingers outstretched toward your opponent's face or eyes. Oh my God! Downward pointing elbow strike. I guess that needs to be banned. Groin attacks of any kind. I wouldn't ban groin attacks. If you can't leg check a groin kick, you're not a black belt. We used to spar full contact as close to no rules as possible in the dojo. The only rules were no biting, no eye gouge, and no throat jab. And groin kicks were encouraged. And hardly any of the men ever managed to get kicked in the groin because we could all leg check it so easily. If you cannot leg check a groin kick, you're not a black belt. I'm sorry. Buck Owl, supposedly 300 fights winner, got kicked 20 something times in the groin in one fight and didn't even leg check. That's not a black belt. That's a paper champion. Sorry. To dispel your illusions, a freaking yellow belt can leg check. If they can't, they got promoted too easily. Kneeling in or kicking the head of a grounded opponent. All right, that's reasonable to ban that. Stomping of a grounded fighter. That's reasonable to ban that. Holding opponent's gloves or shorts. That's not reasonable to ban because that actually makes it almost impossible to put a wrist lock on your opponent legally, which I pointed out to Ramsey Dewey. He said the locks are not banned, but they never use them. And I know that they do work against even second-degree black belts, because that's how I used to beat second-degree black belts, is with wrist locks and ankle locks. So that is not reasonable to ban, holding the opponent's gloves or shorts. Holding or grabbing the fence or ropes with fingers or toes. That's not reasonable to ban either. Because in a real fight, you can use the terrain against your opponent. So that's not reasonable to ban. Small joint manipulation. That's not reasonable to ban. If you don't want your fingers or toes broken, don't fight. That is not reasonable to ban. Throwing an opponent out of the ring, that's not reasonable to ban. If you're strong enough to throw your opponent over that 6 or 7 foot wall, you should get an automatic win. Intentionally placing a finger into any orifice or into any cut or laceration of your opponent. A fighter may not place their fingers into an open laceration in an attempt to enlarge the cut. A fighter may not place their fingers into an opponent's nose, ears, mouth, or any body cavity. Well, that's reasonable because we don't want them sticking it up their ass. Clawing, pinching, twisting the flesh. Any attack that targets the fighter's skin by clawing at the skin or attempting to pull or twist the skin to apply pain is illegal. Timidity, avoiding contact or consistently dropping the mouthpiece or faking an injury. They do that all the time and don't even get penalized for it. I see them running away from one another instead of fighting, and they don't even get penalized. Use of abusive language in the fighting area. Wow, Israel Adesanya should be banned then. Because that's all he does is cuss at people. Flagrant disregard for the referee's instructions. Unsportsmanlike conduct that causes an injury to an opponent. Well, you just banned damn near everything I learned in martial arts. Because if I put a real lock on you, it's going to break your arm or leg. If I put a half-ass lock on you, you might have a high pain tolerance and get out of it. Removed as a foul, throwing in the towel during competition. Of course, that's never should have been a foul. Throwing the towel means you give up. You ought to have a right to quit if you're losing. I mean, that was ridiculous. And sometimes the fighter doesn't realize they're getting the shit beat out of them when they've done taking one too many punches or kicks to the head. They're not competent to give up on their own. So the corner should be allowed to throw in the towel. That's a good change. Removed as a foul, throwing in the towel. I mean, but some of these are completely ridiculous. You can't grab the gloves or uniform? I thought we were supposed to be simulating as close to real fighting as possible. How do you put a wrist lock on somebody without grabbing the gloves? Because I got two pair actually of MMA legal gloves over there, and they cover your whole finger to the second joint, and they cover your whole wrist, and they got wrist reinforcement, which I don't even like the idea of that. If you can't throw a punch without hurting your own wrist, that's your fault. You shouldn't have a uniform that's reinforcing your wrist against hurting yourself. Because part of the thing of martial arts is learning how to do the technique correctly without hurting yourself, right? So they ought to modify the gloves to not support the wrist. But Ramsey Dewey claims that the wrist locks are legal. You just can't grab the base of the glove under the base of the glove that's supporting their wrist to do it. All right. Well, I've never seen them use wrist locks because none of them know how to use a wrist lock correctly. He claimed they were low percentage. The way I used to win the 1-versus-2 handicap against 2 second dan black belts in the dojo, one of whom was an ex-Marine, a 235-pound ex-Marine. The way I used to win the 1-versus-2 handicap, and they were both attacking me simultaneously, is I would get one of them in a wrist lock and tap him out and kick his guts out and keep his body between myself and the other one until he tapped out. And then when he tapped out, I'd beat the other one one-on-one. So don't tell me they don't work. I know they work. The problem is the people that are in there don't know what they're doing. Because real fighters that are out there that are better than them don't always have the opportunity, or they working full time and they don't have time to join a fight league. That's just like it takes thousands and thousands of dollars of startup money from somewhere. Either you got to have a sponsor, or you got to have somebody donate to you, or you got to be rich to begin with to get in a fight league. I know because I've tried to join them a couple times. You got to be able to drive yourself all over the freaking countryside as an entry level fighter because you're not making any money at all. It takes everything you make just to get back to the next fight. So unless you're rich, you usually cannot join a fighting league. And you think rich people are the best fighters? I bet you poor people are way better fighters than the rich people. But that wasn't a paper black belt that I was beating in handicap matches. He was an ex-Marine. And my instructor was an ex-Marine. And his instructor won a Medal of Valor and was an ex-Marine. That's who my instructors were. But, you know, MMA and Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is a complete freaking deception. It doesn't even work. See, I know because I've been to the Gracie dojo for a year and a half, and I can tap out the Gracie black belts piss easily. Most of them, anyway. I should have started by pointing that out again because I did in the other video, but I should have started 9 minutes ago by pointing out that I can tap them out. I can tap out the professional fighters at the Gracie Dojo, the 20 something wins professional fighters at the Gracie Dojo. I tap them out 3 times in a row and they don't tap me out once in an entire session. Like I said in the other video, the first time I joined up, the assistant instructor was a second-degree black belt with 20 some odd professional wins. And and his wife was like, he's a professional fighter. I bet you're going to learn a lot here. And I was like, we'll see, because I was trained by a Medal of Valor winner. And it turned out I didn't learn a damn thing there the entire time I was there, because I already knew everything they taught and more than them. And they thought they were the kings of grappling. And I came from a karate style, and I beat the grapplers at grappling, the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu grapplers, supposedly the best ones in the world. The only time they beat me is if they rigged the exercise against me. For example, entering your opponent's guard is pretty stupid if you start, because the guard position in jiu-jitsu is actually the superior position. So when they start you off having to enter the guard of a black belt or even a blue belt, you're actually putting yourself at a handicap by doing that. Because they don't admit this, but the guard, the person on the bottom, actually has an advantage in jiu-jitsu. But I would not, under any circumstances, wrestle somebody to the ground intentionally in a street self-defense situation. I would beat them standing up, because you don't know how many people are going to jump you and club you once you start wrestling somebody. And at least if you're on your feet, you could either turn and fight them off one at a time, or whatever, or you could turn and run and hope you can outrun them. Whereas if you're on the ground wrestling your first attacker, you're absolutely screwed by the time the second and third attacker join in. They're just going to beat the living hell out of you. Stab you in the back, club you in the head with something, or whatever. So don't tell me that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is good for self-defense. It's useless for self-defense. You're completely foolish if you think that's good self-defense.